Hi, Sharath. It's nice to have you again with us.
Hi, Guy. Thanks for having me again. Excited to be here.
And, we introduced you as a red team specialist last time in your bio, and I recommend every viewer to look at that because Sharath has a quite long and interesting career behind himself. I warmly recommend everybody to get an insight. So in the show notes, you'll also see the link to that video. But today we're trying to go deeper into red teaming, and I think an important area really is it's a very complex area, and I think one has to get it really right. And so we'll focus today on the 10 mistakes to avoid when doing red teaming. We'll guide you through that, and I think that will give you an idea how to prepare yourself or how to guide your supplier if you have someone helping you out on this area. So, Sharath, what would you say is the first mistake to avoid?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very happy to talk about this. So, one of the things that we commonly see is not defining a very clear objective and scope for the team company, or if it's an internal team, not having a clear defined scope is one of the most common problems I've seen.
What would be the result of that not having a clear objective? What is a negative consequence?
So the negative consequences of not giving a very clear objective or a scope is you end up getting the red team focusing on things that are non-essential or not important to your threat landscape, essentially going after systems that are probably vulnerable, but at the same time doesn't lead to anything that you consider as critical, right? So it's essentially going to not highlight the glaring risks of the in the heart of your organization. It's not what you want out of a red team engagement.
What would you say is mistake number two?
So the other thing again we have seen very commonly is treating red team engagement as a one-time event. I've done it once. I think we have fixed the findings, and I think it's done and over. Right? That's very common across organizations to consider it as like, yes, it's a checkbox event and it's done.
Okay, you don't, because the landscape is evolving all the time, and hence the findings will be different every time. And the vulnerability knowledge, the threat landscape, and your environment will be different.
Yeah, oftentimes, of course, there's a change in the tech stack. There's a constant change in personnel who are involved in running your infrastructure and writing code. At the same time, there is also latest TTPs and techniques that are evolving. So it's one thing for us to treat it as a one-time event, but unfortunately, the threat landscape doesn't freeze in time. So every time there is a new attack vector, every time there is a new application or attack surface, the threat landscape changes, and it's advised to kind of have red teaming on a continuous schedule rather than just a one-time event.
What would be the next mistake to avoid?
So one of the things, I want to talk about also is the lack of collaboration or transparency between the red teamers and the internal teams, right? So the red teams are coming in for a very short period of time with very little or no knowledge to your organizations or systems, right? This wouldn't be a case for a well-known attacker or a threat actor, right? They would have unlimited time, unlimited resources. So to some extent, it is our job to kind of give them all the help they need to succeed. At the same time, the internal teams do need to collaborate with the red team to kind of understand what exactly is the strategy of defense, or what exactly is the current state of security concerns for them, right? So that the red team can essentially focus on the most critical aspects, and it's a synchronized effort.
Okay, so what would be mistake number four?
Well, oftentimes, once the red team engagement is concluded, you get the report out of it, and then you have a list of findings that you have to fix, right? Which is great. But you're also missing an opportunity to actually do a root cause analysis as to why these existed in the first place, right? Um, and also understanding if the fixes implemented are actually leading to a systemic fix, or is it just a patch for one area in your network or organization, right? So a post engagement analysis is usually critical, especially with your internal teams, to understand, okay, why does these kind of classes of vulnerabilities exist in my organization?
So, how about mistake number 5?
Well, sometimes we have also noticed where organizations or the leaders are heavily focused on how the red team needs to be conducted, right? Which which doesn't help a whole lot because you don't have that level of control over a threat actor, right? So when it comes to red team engagements, there is some level of freedom or creative freedom, I should say that the red teamers should have in order to find the real threats and real vulnerabilities in your system rather than having restrictions and controls in place which kind of only limits the visibility of your attack surface.
Okay, moving on to mistake number 6. What would be that?
Well, the other thing is blindly trusting your existing security controls. A lot of times, the assumptions are made that I have a firewall, I have a web application firewall, or I have this particular network appliance and I'm completely secure on this front, right? It may not be true. We may have overlooked some of the configurations there. We may have not really looked at our blind spots. So it is very necessary that we don't just assume that one defense mechanism or one security mechanism is going to block all the attacks, right? It's very important that we don't trust on one solution for everything. So it's a combination of multiple security controls that kind of protects you. So you shouldn't overlook the fact that because I have a firewall, I'm secure. It's never been true, and it's not the case.
That's why I think that's also in some ways the huge benefit of doing the red teaming exercise, where finally you become aware of that. Okay, so tell me, what's mistake number 7?
The other thing that you may want to consider doing is follow up trainings, right? There's a reason why these mistakes happened. It could be the developers who wrote the code were unaware of the um, security bugs when they wrote the code, or it could be just poor configuration of your security systems, right? So it's very important that we understand the root cause and where possible, we provide training for the personnel because at the end of the day, they are responsible for writing secure code and maintaining a secure system. So follow up training based on the learnings from the red team engagement will go a long way in understanding how to overall secure your systems.
Okay, so what would be mistake number 8?
The mistake number 8 could be focusing solely on the tech stack that you have. Like one key element, which you kind of touched upon just earlier, is the human factor, right? A lot of the security breaches that happened over the past decade happened because of a user or an employee in your company mismanaging, mishandling credentials or whatnot, right? So focusing only on tech stack is great, but then there are also elements of exploiting the weakest link in your organization, which is the human factor. And a lot of the attacks that surround around humans involves things like social engineering and phishing and luring people into giving away their secrets of the organization, right? So that's also very important.
Can I ask you then, if you, I mean, obviously, some red teaming they also involve gathering intelligence beforehand, so you can do very technical red teaming, but also some actually do maybe even use the threat intelligence or actually do social engineering. So, would you recommend actually doing it full stack then, so that you can actually also become aware of not only the technology vulnerabilities, but also the human vulnerabilities and anything in that range?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, focusing solely on tech would give you an understanding of gaps in your network or applications. But I would definitely recommend getting an understanding of what data of your organization is out there on the internet or dark web, right? At the same time, how easy is it to actually attempt to do social engineering or phishing or even wishing attacks on your employees? So this kind of rolls back into user education or the training. Is our training sufficient enough for people to recognize what is an attack and what is not? And oftentimes, to some extent, it's gives us back a feedback that yes, I need to do more training, and here's where I need to prioritize for my upcoming year. Right? It's at the end of the day, it's about prioritizing where you want to focus your training on.
Makes sense. Okay, what would be mistake number 9?
So the other things is not adapting to the latest and evolving threats. So you may have seen a lot of attacks in the past year, and you may have implemented or invested in defenses that are applicable for those attacks, right? But over time, those security controls you have may not be relevant anymore because of the evolving and changing threat landscape. So it is very important that we continuously adapt and understand the adversary's playbook, which means when you emulate a red team engagement is when you actually learn, all right, so the defense and the control systems that I placed over the last years is efficient back then, but is no longer valid because we have net new attacks. So kind of having that follow up on understanding, okay, what is my current posture would go a long way as well.
Makes sense, absolutely. Okay, let's come to the final mistake, mistake number 10.
Yeah, finally, I kind of this is very close to my heart. One thing is, it is important that we let the developers or the service engineers or your infrastructure team know about the fix about the bugs, because they have to go back and fix it. It is great. I mean, yes, that's very important. But it's also very important that this is very well communicated with your leadership, right? Either the red team does it directly as part of an exec readout, or somebody in your team is able to put together the risks in a way that the leadership can understand, right? So oftentimes that particular bridge doesn't happen. So it goes into the tech team, they fix it, and then it's forgotten. But it's always important that the exec leadership understands what is the current state of security posture on a regular basis each time a red team engagement is conducted.
I can only agree on that, and I think that's why on our channel itself here on the video on YouTube, we try to address ourselves to executives, to board members, to explain security in some sense. And I think, especially when we look at red teaming, we're not talking about standards, we're not talking about KPIs and metrics. We try to understand the battlefield. We try to understand what is the adversary. We try to understand what are the weaknesses of our defenses. And I think getting an idea, which is much more physical in some sense, of where we well defended, and what is the pressure from the adversary on the different parts of our company, is giving us a different imagination of the security problem, not just a long list of to-dos and not just a few metrics or KPIs, which are also important, and not just about standards and compliance. I think understand that we all do all this to defend ourselves against bad guys, but we never see them. So we have to imagine them. Where are they? Where's the pressure? Where are the different angles in which they can attack us, and how can we defend ourselves? And having increasing the understanding of this battlefield, as I call it, I think is super crucial. Well, that was great. Thanks so much, Sharath, for sharing this with us.
Yeah, this was a great discussion. Always happy to chat about offensive security. Thanks, Dee.